can be hard to keep going on, but here we are. Here we are. Happy Wednesday, everyone. We're so glad you are with us. My name is Yodit Mesvin Johnson. I work on the team at New. Join me in saying hi to my co-conspirators, Carly and Hamida, and our very special guest, Aton Bridges, who you'll get a chance to meet soon. If you're here today, it's because we are asking this question: how do we govern ourselves? I know that many folks, including me, speak often about how we need to transform the nonprofit system and the field, and we do. One important question to ask always is who owns, controls, and makes decisions? Where is power in our organizations and in our communities? Not in the context of us doing quote unquote like better for people or workers, but in the context of building systems that structurally remove the top-down, extractive, degenerating, inhumane, and frankly, poverty conditions that people are having to endure, especially in our work. And this really got us thinking about how we govern ourselves. And Aton came into my life, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later, but just at the right time, and really challenged me to think about the ways I've internalized these systems. I really can't wait for you to hear from him. And our tagline at New is transforming the future together. And I think we always run the risk of that word being jargony, right? What does it really mean to transform? And we think that it can begin with talking about our relationships with each other and how we can have more equitable and just participation. That's really key. Beginning with each other, with workers, with community members, and frankly, with nonprofit boards. They're a vital part of this too. And just so we're clear, governance is about and includes the structures and processes that are designed to ensure accountability and transparency and responsiveness and to create stability. We hope that and think that we have an opportunity to grow governance to be more equitable, more inclusive, to bolster empowerment, so power with instead of power over, and to increase broad-based participation. It is how we order ourselves. And we know that many of the tried and true methods of governance, globally, nationally, regionally, locally, and even some of the methods we use, like Robert's Rules of Orders, have their roots in colonialism. I've worked for nearly 2 decades with nonprofits and leaders, and it is clear to me that how we are structured is not getting to the desired results. You could argue reasonably, which is what we're doing today, that the structure itself is flawed and we need to move differently. So we're asking and getting curious about the kind of governance we need to meet our responsibility to past and future generations. How do we integrate the ancestral wisdom of those that have been marginalized and enslaved into the systems and structures which our communities need? We're building on an opportunity in this pivotal moment in history to shift norms and policies and structures to become more equitable and just, and rallying around this collective vision that catalyzes a shift from fighting for like small reform or of the status quo to transformative creation of the world we want. For me, that's a world beyond violence, and it calls for governance that's rooted in mutual care, that honors our interdependence, and that makes it possible for all of us to thrive. So today, we're exploring big and small questions around cooperation and mutuality and intimate community, my new favorite phrase, intimate community and communication with one another. in hopes that these shifts in our worldviews will return us to what our friend of Centering Justice, Kat Ramos, calls our pre-colonial blueprint. We want to shift towards ways that can embody life and love and opportunities to create with each other. So at Centering Justice, if you have been a part of this community, you know we are asking deep, provocative, and evocative questions. Ain't that right, Hamida?
Totally right, Yoji. Hello, everyone. My name is Hamida Bhagirathi, pronouns she, her, hers. Welcome to my apartment as well. I'm joining you from Ypsilanti today on the unceded and occupied lands of the 3 council fires of Michigan, the Sauk and Fox and Wyandotte tribes, and land in which contemporary Native American Indigenous folks are living and thriving and contributing to our collective uplift. And as Yodit mentioned, we're talking about governance and how we build community build intimate community. And I think particularly prescient for this is knowing that we are a community that has succeeded other communities, and we are currently building our own. And that gives us opportunity to think about the different ways in which we might make shifts in the way that we move. And so we're inviting folks to think about today, how do we want to govern ourselves? So as you might have experienced if you've attended Centering Justice before, this is a place where we really uplift BIPOC voices, folks who are Black, Indigenous, people of color, who are really the visionaries, the storytellers, the waymakers, wayfinders, imagineers to really get us to that transformative place. And Yodit and I have been having conversations about transformation. What is that? And today we're gonna dig into some of that. In real direct ways too. And of particular import for us is the question, how must and will we transform to realize our visions of a just and thriving society? And we're going to be spending time on that. In this chapter of Centering Justice, we're really going to be focusing on how we untether, how we release ourselves from oppressive systems, how we just disengage, move away from. And in our past chapters, we talked about like healing and the different ways in which we heal with ourselves, with each other in places and spaces, and how that's an essential ingredient to transformation. So we're building on that to think about what is transformation and how are we doing the thing? So from December to March, we're going to spend our time exploring the ways in which we actively choose to exit old oppressive systems, and at the same time build new ways of being and working together towards a just transition. And what is a just transition anyway? So it's really how communities build thriving economies that provide dignified, productive, ecologically sustainable livelihoods, really human-centered, democratic governance, ecological resilience. And together, we're going to be connecting with folks who are building towards that just future, nurturing power within, not over, alongside, together, uplifting and listening to voices of those folks most impacted by unjust systems, and really considering what is needed to bring about justice, and creating effective shared community leadership and governance models and practices, of which we'll be exploring one today. And today we are so excited. I feel like I'm talking a lot, and we're almost there, Aton. We're almost there. We're going to connect with Aton Bridges, who we've been learning a lot about in terms of community governance with and from, including skills that we need for effective decision making. And how do we decide decisions? Cooperation in ways we can manage and facilitate ourselves in structured, intentional, and less harmful and loveful ways than the top-down paternalistic ways that we've learned. I also have to give Aton some flowers. So I'm gonna read that bio because I was just awed by it. So Aton is a rural North Carolina native based in Jackson, Mississippi. He's a human rights advocate committed to Black New African self-determination. In that arena, he organizes locally with the Mississippi Rising Coalition. Aton and his wife, Ama, also co-founded the ag tech startup Agrohood. Agrohood is a collaborative food sovereignty platform to reconnect Black farmers and their communities. It also connects them to Rerooted Futures Initiative, an NGO that rebuilds safety, sustainability, and abundance systems in the Southeast Gulf Coast area. Aton's work has roots in the tradition of Sankofa, emphasizing collective and cooperative farmstead development. Thank you so much for being with us today, Aton. In our Centering Justice tradition, we invite our speaker collaborators to bring their whole selves into the space. And in that spirit, Aton, I ask you to tell us about the communities and identities that you're drawing upon as you enter into this conversation with us today.
Hey, y'all.
Hey.
Just FYI, my sound might get real wonky here. My headphones just gave me the, oh, I'm about to die sound. So I have some backups here, but I might have to switch back and forth between the phone and another set of headphones. But I guess as far as my whole self is, I'm from Robeson County, North Carolina. So I grew up in an environment that was primarily a combination of Europeans, Black folks / New Africans, and First Nation folk, Umbis specifically, mostly like three equal shares, you know. So that's really kind of like where I'm coming from, this rural area. You know, a lot of monoculture, extractive agriculture or whatnot. Yeah, and that's just a part of like who I am. Spent a bunch of time in Atlanta, Georgia. Lived on a farm in Alabama, and then came here to Mississippi and what. So basically just been organizing here in Mississippi with Mississippi Rising Coalition, responding to the water crisis, trying to build food sovereignty in this state with a massive agricultural industry that doesn't actually feed its people. So it's a lot we're working with.
Atom, I mentioned that we are holding this question of what must and will transform. And I'm interested to hear more from you about your story of transformation. And I know your mom was a big part of that. Can you tell me more about her and about your journey in the service? And what is your story of transformation? Because you're doing some really interesting work these days.
I guess my story of transformation would really be grounded in reading, you know, just really having access to a lot of books. My mother made sure that you know, there was a lot of books in her. She had a little closet that was like full of her old college textbooks and other books that she had or whatnot. My father and my uncle, they had their military manuals or whatnot. So I always had books, even though we were in a very rural environment. So I could go outside and play, and there was always books. Even you know, after school, as I got older, you know, small town environment, I could walk from school to the library and whatnot. So I always had books. I know we talked a lot about this earlier, but coming from a family that used to have a lot of land, but you know, of course, things happen, and then the family began to like transition out of the rural environment into the urban environment, into the you know, the more like a state-based service and whatnot. As far as like military service, prison industrial complex, I went into the military and whatnot, which was weird. Luckily, I got out with before all of the blatant adventurism happened in the Middle East or whatnot, and really just began the process to decolonialize myself or whatnot. Attempts were made to, like, I guess you could say, pipeline me into being in the prison industrial complex, which was becoming a part of, like, I guess you could say, the family business, so to speak. And I really
Yeah,
wasn't
your family had worked in prisons, right? It was part of their work.
Yeah, they still do.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I wasn't with that. Yeah, and I was like, taking that test was like the first test that I was like, yeah, I'm going to intentionally fail this, because it's so blatant, because they basically ask you in the test, are you willing to, like, dehumanize other human beings and follow orders? And I was like, nah, I'm not really interested in that
No,
at
thank you,
all.
please. No,
Yeah,
thank you.
like, yeah, that ain't right. Not with that too much. But yeah, always, I think one of the big things that really made me start to question stuff was, like, just this overriding sense that, something isn't right in the world. I remember when I was I don't know, my mom had called me one day and she was like, they invaded Iraq, and I was like, why? You know what I'm saying? Because I'm just paying attention at the time and understanding that, we're dealing with two different locations. What does Iraq have to do with Afghanistan, supposedly? So it was just like, and that kind of, like, was the thing that really just made me commit deeper to, like, getting a grasp of actually what's happening. Why are we in this situation as a people? Why are they fighting in Palestine? Who is like Yasser Arafat or whatnot? All of these questions, and just really trying to get a deeper understanding of why the world is functioning how it is. So that, I would really say that my journey of transformation has always been about getting to the deeper questions of why things are the way they are, and also who we are as a people, and from a historical sense of whatnot.
What I appreciate about that is, I think, first of all, I admire, and I think I share in kind of always asking why, right? Why? Because I think what we don't always see or understand is the way that these systems kind of lure us in. You mentioned that your family, you grew up in this rural area, and there are these enticements that happen to assimilating into systems. And sometimes it's for survival and safety. And I want to be clear about that, because when we talk about the work of transformation and we talk about, like, how are we world building and recreating, like, they're somewhere between exiting, trying to reform systems and the status quo, and building. What I've observed, Aton, is that we have to have a bridge of safety for folks and a way of luring them away from those systems. And when your mere survival is based upon that, it can be easier said than done. So it sounds like for you, that story of transformation begins with asking questions, why? And then how does it unfurl as you're getting answers? How does it unfurl for you? You leave the military,
it really,
clearly. You're not in the military anymore.
Oh, no, that. Yeah, we that did not work out at all or whatnot. I mean, so one of the things that I want to touch on your point right quick, because the town that I'm from, is what they would call a mill town or a textile town or whatnot. You know what I'm saying? And that was one of the things that really sustained my family. Because I want to touch on this point of you really talking about people transitioning to systems from a safety-based perspective. You know, we had our town, man, when my little town used to be like 2,000 people or whatnot, but Burlington Mills had 4 facilities in that town or whatnot. So there was an abundance of like so-called quote unquote good jobs, literally up until like NAFTA or the North American Free Trade Act or whatnot. And at that point, Burlington basically abandoned the town and put those factories in Mexico. So at that point, you know, that was when like that really accelerated the transition of the whole family from a rural existence to really transitioning almost the entire family over a span of a decade to Raleigh, North Carolina, or whatnot, to again these more state-based jobs or whatnot, which is, you know, becoming a part of the mechanism of oppression or whatnot. But after the military, I really spent a lot of time back on the homestead of my my grandmother's sister, and they had I want to say it was about 2 to 3 acre homestead or whatnot, and they were elderly, so there was like she was practically she was practically my grandmother, because my grandmother had actually died when I was very, very young or whatnot. Like I wasn't even a year old when she died. But I spent a lot of time just on this homestead, like working the land. And you know, they were getting up in the years, so the homestead didn't have like as many of the systems, I would say now, as it did as I was growing up. You know, for instance, when my uncle, when he was growing up there, they had hogs and chickens. You know, they kept both sides because it was like fields on both sides of the house. Kept both of those plowed and planted. Then when I was younger, they just had the chickens. And then when I came back from the military, it was pretty much just my aunt by then, my great aunt by then. So it wasn't as much happening, but it was still functional, like for her or whatnot. So I just spent a lot of time like getting back to the land, and just really still hitting up libraries and bookstores and just learning. And that was the time that I kind of made the decision, you know, I'm gonna get in technology, because I started playing around with the internet in the military or whatnot and building computers and things like that. And I just said, I still don't really know that much about it. And it's pretty much the only thing that I don't understand how to teach myself about it. So that's when I decided to like go to school and begin to learn about technology or whatnot, which kind of like led me to where I am now or whatnot.
Yeah, you made the last centering justice, our guest, Susan Matus, now spends the majority of her time in Idlewild, Michigan, which is a 115-year-old, primarily and historically Black resort-ish area. At least that was its history. And she was sharing with us just the difference of moving from the big city of Detroit to being there, kind of reconnecting with nature as a practice for her along her healing journey, right? Just kind of like how she found this reset, if you will, of her nervous system, like regulating to watching the sunrise, you know, and communing, like just slowing the pace of her work down and what that had meant for her in terms of healing and personal transformation. And it sounds like those decades over the years, one, you can see the way that your family's land and property and their assets on that farm are changing, right? But then also you're still learning these practices of caring for a homestead and maybe alternative ways of being besides what in your formal training and the like. And I remember you sharing what it had meant, like how much land Black folks had acquired kind of during Reconstruction, right? And how we've seen that significantly reduced. And what I've appreciated as I'm getting to know you is the way you, even like your reference to NAFTA and how industry and jobs and those sort of things are changing and kind of happening to us, right? That's what, and I think that's really important when we're talking about governance and mutuality and interdependence, whether we know it or not, we're being impacted by these systems, and again, being lured into them for safety and for many other reasons. I think a lot as someone who I'm battling a chronic illness, and just the amount of bureaucracy that I have to go through when navigating the medical industrial complex. You mentioned the prison industrial complex. We have said many times in this space that we're operating in a nonprofit industrial complex, a field and a sector that's commodified care. And yet I can tell you not one of the 42 people that showed up to this Zoom today doesn't care about the well-being of others. And we are operating within practices, processes, and principles that are inherently violent, and yet our well-being tied to them. And so that's kind of at the meta level, right? So I am organizing with a coalition of folks who are re-envisioning safety in Washtenaw County. And we have been trying to think about what the structure of that organization needs to look like. And we learned about a group called Sociocracy for All that trains people around sociocratic principles and methods. And the facilitator of that group, who I think is Anna, had, I'm gonna mute you for just a second while you change, Aton. But the facilitator of that group, Anna, had brought to our attention that the folks at Sociocracy for All have these kind of group, work groups that will sponsor your project and help you think about your structure. And so as we were preparing the work with that group, a question in our group came up about the confidentiality of our work. And so by instinct, I said, because as a governance facilitator and as a executive in a nonprofit and as a board member, we often talk about confidentiality and non-disclosure. My team all have to sign agreements to, around conflict of interest. Probably many of you have those as well. And so someone had expressed concern, like how, if we're going to send our information off to this group who we don't know, shouldn't we have a non-disclosure agreement? And so the long story short was that I think that was conveyed to the folks that were helping us. And then Aton, where you kind of enter this is Anna then shares back with the group an email where you lovingly but directly challenge us about using what Audre Lorde would call the master's tools, right? Like if we are trying to develop cultures of care and relationships rooted in trust and in solidarity, why would we use an apparatus like that? And what are the I think the important question you asked is like, what are the baked assumptions or what protections might you put in place for yourselves that would alleviate whatever fear was at the root of that request? And it pierced me, your email, because unconsciously, and I don't know if I said this, but it was me who was like, hey, I have a template we use that new, like I can float that to the group, right? And so I think I felt particularly pierced and convicted when I saw the feedback, because it's that moment where you're like, dang, you know, like so true. And beyond that, it made me realize that the nascent, like emergent ways of being and values that we were creating hadn't given us, they weren't fleshed out enough to give us guidance for how we wanted to be in relationship with partners, right? So even though there was the first like, clutch your pearls, oh my God, and admittedly it was like we did something bad, right? The follow-up was like, oh no, actually what we did is we didn't inculcate the agreements for how we wanted to be in relationship. And I think that is what really has you here with me today, because that loving accountability that you called us to in a blink, like just in the simplicity of reading an email, was a game changer for me. Like I will forever again, forever now think about what is the intention behind this apparatus, this request, this tool, et cetera. Can you talk about like your side of that story? And then I'm gonna follow up with a question, I think just to round it out, like, because there were, obviously we weren't in direct communication at that time.
Yeah, so I'm gonna transition and also talk a little bit about the mechanics of sociocracy at this point as well. So I was elected to be the leader of our student circle, of which Anna was basically our customer or whatnot. She came to the circle with she was the client or whatnot, and I was elected the leader. So it was my job to really interface with her and ensure that the circle was fully informed of her needs or whatnot. And the leader is one of the three. It's one of the three leadership roles within sociocracy. And one of the things that I learned, which is still kind of blowing my mind, is like within sociocracy, you have like the future, the past, and the present within the functioning of a sociocratic entity or whatnot. The future, the leader he's in charge of, or they're in charge of the future. They have to like maintain the overall vision of what it is that the client wants to achieve. The facilitator is in charge of the present, the managing the day-to-day conversations of the circle. And then the secretary does what? They keep track of the minutes. So therefore they're in charge of the past and whatnot. So I was the principal person that had to communicate with Anna and make sure that, I'm drawing out from her as much as possible, because that was my job. And then I was supposed to go to the facilitator and the secretary, and we would use that to basically decide on what the agenda was going to be. So within the context of that, Anna was trying to figure out like how to get us as much information as possible, because people had a lot of questions. When you have the structure like we were in, which is kind of like a consultative type situation, you're trying to get as much from the customer or the client as possible as far as information, so you can build a better product or whatnot. And of course, we also do this, in web design and various other professions or whatnot. So Anna's I guess Anna's thinking, was that, hey, we'll just give the circle access to all the information that my group has compiled. And then I guess she came back to y'all and said, well, okay, well, what are the privacy constraints with that? And then I guess that's when you suggested the NDA. Then Anna came to me and said, hey, what do y'all feel about an NDA? And I was like, yeah.
You're like, nah, son.
let's have a conversation.
Yeah.
That because I wasn't really feeling like that, because we're students, right? And we're paying, to basically engage in this process as student learners, but as student learners with some background in sociocracy or whatnot. So I was like, what are we really talking about here? Because honestly, I'm still angry that, for instance, the situation with like R. Kelly or whatnot, yeah, R. Kelly, he did wrong, but that he's illiterate. So he wasn't writing these NDAs. So who was writing those actual NDAs? And why aren't we talking about them, right?
Yeah.
So it's like,
let me just say what NDA is. It's a non-disclosure agreement, and it is often a binding contract that prohibits people from disclosing the particulars in an agreement or in an arrangement. And so sometimes those are also referred to as confidentiality agreements, where you enter into a legally binding contract that says, I'm not going to disclose whatever business it is that we're in. And when you reference R. Kelly, an R&B musician who would later be found guilty of multiple sexual assault and violent acts against girls and women, he is functionally illiterate, and we all knew it. And so what you're saying is that many of those girls who then wanted to whistleblow were encumbered to do that by these disclosure agreements. And so you're pointing us at the weapon or the tool that is violently silencing the victims of sexual assault and violence in that case. I appreciate you bringing that up.
Right. Because whoever wrote those NDAs knew what was happening or whatnot. So they were parties. To me, they were parties just as much as he was.
Can I say one more thing? Can I bring this into, because our work is a lot with social change and nonprofit organizations. So some examples of where you've seen these are employee contracts, are agreements that we have our staff and our boards sign. We have often conflicts of interest policies, but within where you're supposed to disclose conflicts that you might have. But we have a number of legal and or cultural tools that we use to govern people's behavior. And this is an opportunity for us to interrogate, because if you're like me, real talk, I inherited a lot of these formal organizational documents that we have from somebody else, either some lawyer or some private sector thing, or hell, at this point, the Googles, right? We download a thing. How many of you have signed an independent contractor agreement? So just, I want you thinking about those formal and informal contracts when we're talking about non-disclosure, in this case of the story that Aton and I are connected to.
Well, I want to add, if we may add one tiny bit, EOD, Aton, thank you so much for, sharing this perspective about an NDA. And EOD, as you were sharing, I think about how those sorts of like shorthand documents can be stand-ins for morals and ethics and the ways in which we want to be in relationship with each other, and sort of seemingly bypass that really important, crucial work for how do we want to be in relationship with each other, especially around like our own morals and ethics, many of which are cultural, religious, community-based. And they can be subsumed by things that might be lying within the contract or legalese or whatever else that might not honor what the person or group or people feel, but sort of is seemingly protective and provides this I guess, rules of safety. But safety from what, I think, is an important question. And how does that perhaps hinder the ways in which people can connect with each other?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to think about risk mitigation too. And, I'll like in the case of nonprofit boards, keep in mind the structure, right? The IRS has said this primarily volunteer group is set to be stewards of public dollars and public interest. And so when you begin from the context, which many of these contractual documents, right, are intended to mitigate risk. My assertion, though, Hamida, is that one, there are also places where we wield and hoard power. And to the point in the comments, safety from what, right? And a lot of times we're replicating or repurposing these documents without pausing to ask, what are we protecting ourselves from or against? And get back in there, though, please. Yeah. Yeah, and what is real or imagined?
Yeah, so basically the compromise was that Anna was going to have to be she was basically going to have to be the go-between between the concerns of team and or information that we needed, questions that we had, and then that way y'all could still like keep your confidentiality in place within those core documents, because honestly we didn't really need all of that information for this particular project, because one, we're still student learners, right, trying to learn deeper about this process, and we didn't have the bandwidth, because I think the class was only like 8 or 9 weeks, so we really didn't have enough of time to really go deep into your documents. So basically the workaround was, again, deeper and more intimate communication. We had our questions that basically comprised some of Anna's homework, and then she took those questions and she brought those back to y'all's team, and we got the answers that we needed, as opposed to having to navigate that legal framework and then end up having to process a lot more information than we really had the bandwidth to do or whatnot. Yeah.
It was just such a powerful invitation, and we've been referring to sociocracy. I want to move to that and have you just kind of break that down. And I should preface that this chapter of Centering Justice is about exploring methods and approaches that are that allow us to untether ourselves from what has been, and to have something we can latch on to try and to practice and to experiment with. So can you talk about, Aton, like, what's the point of sociocracy? What is it? What are the values or principles associated with it? And particularly what, sort of drew you to it? What is sociocracy?
So sociocracy, can y'all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Your phone's died, so.
You just flexing, you making it work. I love it.
But it's basically a form of governance. And, governance is basically, how you conduct your work in a group. You know what I'm saying? It's the processes by which you make decisions and execute the mission of whatever the collective is that you're in. You have different forms of governance. You have parliamentary procedure, which is what Robert's Rules of Order is, which was actually created by, I found out, by the U.S. Army or whatnot. A couple hundred, right at 100 or so years ago or whatnot. But parliamentary procedures is what you would use in a parliament, or quote unquote. rather formal in government environment. Then you have models such as consensus, and consensus is trying to get everyone to agree, whereas opposed to Robert Rules of Order is simply majority rule.
Majority. And by the way, most boards are using one or the other of those two options to govern themselves. So either a majority, and that's where the all in favor say aye, any opposed, any, abstention, or culturally, we have a lot of consensus voting and governing that happens, which is generally the loudest people or the most influential people are influencing the will of the group, and others are acquiescing, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Go ahead.
And consensus is what I would argue is one of those traditional genetic blueprints that we have as a people or whatnot. I do consider consensus to be like one of those soft technologies that clearly we had to develop in order to achieve, really achieve, what we've achieved as humans or whatnot in terms of evolution. But it does have some weaknesses. Sociocracy is very similar to consensus, but sociocracy is really based on consent. So whereas consensus is more along the lines of, hey, let's all agree. So sociocracy and a consent-based system basically says, hey, trying to frame this as simple as possible. Who is willing to allow this to happen, right? Because you might not necessarily agree with it, but you don't necessarily see a reason to say, hey, stop that. No, I don't agree with it. So you're willing to let it ride, opposed to you having to agree or whatnot. So if you look at a lot of consensus-based systems such as your fist to five or whatnot, a consent-based process would be like, for instance, a 3, which is like, meh, or whatnot. Y'all go ahead and do what you do or whatnot. Now, a consensus system might require everybody to be a 4 or a 5 to move forward or whatnot. Sociocracy says, you know what, we don't need you to agree. We just need you to say, are you okay with this happening? Right?
I think it's important to note, you have to say you're okay or not okay with this happening, as I understand it, which is very different. You use the language of fist to 5, which is a voting mechanism. It's one way that people vote. So you would have the group hold up the number of fingers, based upon like, I fully support, or a fist, I can't support that. And you're saying the 3 consensus would be like, I'm in the middle, like, meh. Where consent is like, you're expressly stating, I'm in support, or I have an objection, and we have created the space for you to articulate that objection and for us to be in principled struggle around it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Now, sociocracy builds on top of that as well. For instance, back during Occupy Atlanta, which was, oh my God, so long ago, the Occupy movement or whatnot, which was largely, a consensus-based process or whatnot. One of the initiatives that came out of our assemblies was, we wanted to rename the park after Troy Davis, who was on death row at the time or whatnot. And we kept running into obstacles with, people of colonizer descent, just blocking it. And once you block something with a consensus system, there's really nothing you can do. It pretty much stops the process. Within sociocracy, you can't do that. Your objection, first and foremost, it has to be a paramount objection. So it has to be, hey, this is not in alignment with what we're doing at all.
Mm.
Then that objection has to be incorporated into the proposal or whatnot. So,
Mhm.
so one of the things that that we came to the conclusion to at the end of our course was that like sociocracy was like it was a complete governance system, right? Because you didn't really need to add anything additional to it. There was the framework to handle your notes, to handle your minutes. There was a framework to or processes to create your agendas. There's processes to ensure that everyone gets a voice. You know, and I think that that's kind of the main thing about sociocracy is that it's a system that's actually designed to distribute and share power. And it's kind of hard to express all of that within the context of like, an interview. It is just, it's layers and layers and layers and layers of really just communication within a group to really make that group be the best that it can be or whatnot.
Yeah, Hamida, you want to get in there?
Yeah, so Aton, I'm still processing as we're going, but one out of many things that stuck out to me was what I interpreted, and I want to get more into this, is sort of what it means to sort of like be an objector within the model of sociocracy, and how there is sort of a comparison and consideration of what is a proposal that is set forth for action, but alongside sort of like perhaps a group's values or morals or goals or ethics, or really what they aim to do, what their hope is for action. And I was wondering if you talk a little bit more about that, like either in, how a group might kind of coalesce or kind of be around goals, like how that comparison happens, anything around there. Because I'm just like sitting in here and thinking, why wouldn't we do that? And the second thought is, well, I haven't, so that's interesting to entertain, but would love to hear more about that, Aton.
So that's a very good question or whatnot. And again, it goes back to like the structure of sociocracy. So within sociocracy, everything is organized within circles, right? And all of these circles are interconnected together. So when you first come together, when your first core group of people coming together, then that's the parent circle. Now, when you bring together a circle, there's certain things you need to do to really establish the DNA of the circle and that organization. The first thing you need is what we call VMAs. You need your vision, which is what you're trying to achieve. You need your mission. Y'all coming from nonprofit world, so y'all understand what a mission is. But what sociocracy adds is you need your aim. And your aim is the specific work that circle is trying to accomplish, right? Once you have your vision, your mission, and your aim, you're all in. That's your work. That's what you have to do. So if there is an objection, that objection has to be grounded in the vision, the mission, and the aim, right? So if you have an objection and your objection is not rooted in basically, hey, this proposal is basically not in accordance with our aim, our mission, or our vision, then you don't have an objection. It's just that simple. It's very, very narrow. It's really set up so that when you come together and you establish as a group, with your subsequent rounds of everybody having input, what that vision is, what that mission is, what that aim is, that's who you are as an organization. That's your runway, so to speak, and your flight plan all together. Now from there, you begin to establish child circles, and your child circles break down your additional functions that you need to do. And once you break down a child circle, then the child circle has to go through the same exact process. Let's say, for instance, that you start an organization and you want to let's say you want to tackle houselessness or whatnot. And your goal is to end houselessness in your city. All right. So now let's say that you establish a child circle and say, well, hey, we recognize that it's going to take a long time to like actually get housing and make housing happen. So in the meantime, let's start making sure that everyone within our unhoused community is fed, right? So now you would establish a child circle that's just dedicated to that function. So then that circle have to establish its vision, its mission, and its aim within the context of just feeding the unhoused your local unhoused population. And again, that's in service to the parents' main mission, which would be to cure and solve the unhoused population within your local area. Now, some things happen when that occurs. The first thing that happens is when you set up that child circle, first there's a linking that happens, and the linking looks just like this. I'm gonna do it. It's just like this with your parent circle right here and your child circle on the bottom. What's going to happen is somebody from that parent circle is going to be designated as a representative within that child circle. And then that child circle is going to elect somebody to be a part of the parent circle. And they call that a double linking. So now there's a two-way conversation or line of communication that's happening between the parent circle, which is the original larger organization, and then that smaller child circle that's focused specifically on, hey, this circle is just going to focus on feeding our unhoused population. Another component of that is within sociocracy, that once that child circle establishes its work, its mandate is clear. It doesn't have to go back and ask permission of the parent circle. It is fully empowered to execute its vision, mission, and aim, because that's already been approved of by the parent circle. So it's all of these interlocking things within sociocracy that just makes it so powerful, and that's barely scratching the surface or whatnot, which is kind of why I love it.
I mean, wow, so much there. And thank you for like the level of detail and articulation of what it can look like. And someone had asked about what was Robert's rules, and I did put that in the chat. But I want to be clear that the majority of how we govern is happening in that parliamentary way. And I want to make the connection, like you did at the beginning, that, and my assertion is that the majority of how we manage each other, manage our work, manage our boards is born of colonization and European management styles for command and control over bodies.
Domination.
And so if you think about this in the context of your, what we now call employee experience, but people call human resources, right? Mm-hmm. Same thing, that we are using a often hierarchical, not just in structure, but in how decisions get made. If you think about to what Aton was just talking about, how we develop programs, most program folk are beholden to a group of a small, much smaller and often homogenous group of people
Yes.
who have to approve the decisions that they make, or the
Mhm.
budgets, or the resources. And even more of us, particularly like single CEO types, are at the behest of a volunteer board that is similarly using these parliamentary practices and models for decision making. And so what we and here, let me tell you where that becomes problematic. And New is complicit in this. For the last since I started at New almost 15 years ago, I got hired in through funding that was meant to democratize nonprofit boards. And my job was to help match people to boards. And I did, 250 people to a board. And when we started to, over the course of 4 or 5 years, and as we started to go back and ask people, what was that experience like? They would say, I got on the board. That wasn't the problem. And these were young folks, they were diverse people, they were all the things that we were trying to accomplish. But when they got onto the board, they were still stymied by not just the culture of the board, but the decision-making framework of the board, because it was not transparent how decisions got made. There were often influential people, typically folks who brought some form of power, money, influence, resource, right? So we have struggled. Many of you on this Zoom have struggled with, okay, representation is not materially changing the impact of my organization's work, right? I've got Black folks, I've got queer folk, I've got young folk, but we're still not materially changing our work. And so what Aton and this work is unfurling for me, or revealing for me, is that part of that is because we've held on to what could truly democratize the process and truly make it participatory, which is to change the way decisions and who's making decisions get made. So imagine if your program team charged with helping your houselessness organization to make sure that folks were fed wasn't constantly slowed down, for lack of a less articulate word, by they got to go back and get somebody to approve this step and that step and the next step, right? And so what you describe to us is that AIM, and these other pieces are the aim of the circle, the representation both on the parent circle and the child circle, the ways in which then decisions get made within those circles enable more empowerment amongst that group and enliven their activity. Is that about right?
Yeah, pretty much it.
Mhm.
So within the context of sociocracy, for instance, there's some debate about this, but to me, once you create that organization, then your board would really be a child circle of the main circle. So that means the board would pretty much be, I don't want to say subordinate, because
Say
within
that.
sociocracy, but it would basically be a child circle of the main circle or whatnot. So it would still have to report back to that main circle, and it would not be now it would have some special characteristics maybe or whatnot, but it would not because how would you replicate the standard nonprofit model within sociocracy? Is your board going to be the main circle? That doesn't work. It doesn't work.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So again, when you go through a sociocratic model, there's going to be some things that it kind of hard codes the power sharing into the structure. You know what I'm saying? just
Yeah.
by the nature of how sociocracy works.
Mhm. That's so good. There's been lots of comments in the chat, and we're trying to do better, Aten, in this year's CJ of inviting direct questions from our audience for you. So I want to allow time for that. And then something that just fell on my heart is like, what haven't we asked you that you want to share? You've been so generous, but is there something about sociocracy in practice for you or something, go, I see you nodding your head, so I'll be quiet there.
Yeah, so again, when you start to talk about like the basic function of sociocracy, the core mechanism is conducting things in rounds. So you are giving everyone the chance to speak. And you might think that is, okay, everybody gets the chance to speak. But really think about that. Really think about what that means, because that really doesn't happen a lot. Like I've been in the movement for, I'm creeping up on 2 decades. Y'all see all this gray over here, whatnot. I've been at this for a minute. When you start talking about the overwhelming majority, like I'm gonna use a tech term here, 99.99% of the community meetings I've been to has been not really community meetings. They've been community talk at sessions where a bunch of people get on stage, then they talk at the community. There is no mechanism where everybody is actually given the opportunity to speak. And that's like one of the main components of sociocracy. There are different types of process. For instance, proposal generation. You know what I'm saying? So imagine that just having a meeting where you want to generate a proposal and you're giving everybody a chance to speak. How powerful is that? Because in a lot of times, we'll call ourselves organizers or whatever, but we really don't give the community a chance to actually speak. And I've been in environments where I'm a part of the community and I don't get a chance to speak. You know what I'm saying? And there's other people that don't get a chance to speak. So it's like, how are we actually even, if we're fighting for liberation, right? How in the world are we capitalizing on the genius within our communities if we're not even giving people the opportunity to voice?
Come on now, come on.
You know what I'm saying? So, and that's just that's a basic function of sociocracy. Establish rounds, you dedicate your rounds to specific processes, whether you're soliciting ideas for proposals, whether you're refining a proposal, whether you're beginning to implement proposal. Within each one of those processes, there's multiple rounds to get input from everybody. Now, do people have to speak? They can pass, but you're still giving them the opportunity to say, no, I don't feel like contributing, as opposed to just not giving them the chance to speak at all. So I think that's like just that little simple thing right there would be so powerful, because it's like, how much genius are we not leveraging within this movement? You know what I'm saying? If you start,
okay, just stop for a second. Stop. There is always this moment in centering justice, and it just happened. And I need you to say that, what you just said, one more time, please. How much genius are we missing out on?
Oh, yeah.
Right. Instead of like community engagement as an insurance policy, which is often what's happening, right? Yeah. Like we're in the room, in front of the room, like you said, talking at the people and trying to convince them that our proposal is the right one, right? And we're trying to check a box. I'm involved in a process like this right now. what you're suggesting is just, and you know, lots of pushback, but what you're saying that I love, and even when we talk about, like, when I was saying that we got all these people on boards and then they were like, but I'm not really invited to participate, or I'm not like the smartest person in the room, or I don't have, but when we actually value Aton, that collective genius, and we believe that the solutions are here, like we have them in us, right? They're in this room. Can we slow down long enough to provide room to hear from folks? It can be so powerful. It can be so powerful.
Well, think about that also on a global and planetary scale or whatnot.
Come on, brother, help me think about it on a global and planetary scale. Come on, help me. Put me together.
Yeah, so I mean, just think about what colonization has done, and think about like how few people actually have a voice in solving some of these problems. I mean, even their own problem. You know, we always hear stories about NGOs just coming in with like the white savior complex, for instance, or whatnot. So it's like we're not. You know, there's this little meme that's going around, and it's like, you know, you're only using like 10% of the capacity of your brain. I think that if we're talking about like really engagement with like this very, it almost feels like there's less than like 1% of like actual engagement going on with people right now between the institutions and entities that actually have the resources. Because, you know, I am kind of somewhat an Afro pessimist, but I am also like, you know, a realist, and I understand like the capacity of human brains or whatnot. And I feel like a lot of this stuff is just like, we're not really engaging all the brains that we need to engage, you know, and that's by design. You know, people are basically saying, hey, these people, these brains don't matter. And unfortunately, the folks with the resources that they stole, they either don't have the will or the actual cognitive capacity to actually solve these problems that they fundamentally created or whatnot. So yeah, I'll get off of that soapbox.
Shit, you ain't got to get off of it for me. Right where you are, bro. Let's open up. Oof, Aton. Oh my gosh. Let's open up for questions. And what I think we would like to do, we're just going to be quiet for like 7 seconds so that folks have a chance to think. And then you can either put a question in the chat and I will, or Hamida will share it. Or if you promise not to be a mic hog, you can come off of mute by raising your hand, and we'll call on you and allow you to bring your own voice into the space. Okay. I see Eileen noted, rounds seem so important to move through together. In your experience, do you hold meetings that are not about proposals to make decisions on? What are those like, if so? I'm thinking collectively, info sharing, celebration, checking in. And Aton, if you want to see that in the chat, is there too. So the question, and then Samuel, will come to yours next. So first is, do you hold quote unquote meetings that are not necessarily proposals to make decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so within sociocracy, there's a concept called oh my God, what is it? It's lead, do, and measure. So your leading would be your proposal and idea generation. Your doing is actually executing, you know, whatever that work is, and then you're measuring is engaging in your feedback process to like, hey, did this work? Did it not work? What do we need to change? So when you start to talk about what your meetings look like, that's the loop that you're in. You know, you're coming up with ideas to execute the aim in accordance with the mission and the vision. Then you're, legislating those proposals into policy, which may be it may be a specific function. It may be the creation of additional circles. It may be it can be anything or whatnot. But at the end of it, you're also going to measure, the effectiveness of that work. And then you're continuously, reiterating on what you did. Is it going well? Is it going bad? Does it need to change? So yeah, the proposal process is just, the reason we focus on the proposal process is because that's how the work is started. You have to create proposals for, hey, how are we actually going to execute, our aim in accordance to our vision and our mission. So your proposal process is kind of like the first thing you do. Technically, elections are the first thing that you do. But yeah, you're going to generate your proposals, then you're going to put it into practice, and then you're going to measure it. And that's pretty much the process.
Thank you for that, Aton. Samuel asks, I wonder what accountability looks like in sociocracy.
Could you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, can I come off mic too?
Go for it, please. Thank you.
I guess I just mean like in the current relationship I have with my board on a very small level, they are able to say, you need to do this bit better, and I'm able to ask for more support in certain ways. And I wonder how that plays out in this, because it feels like there's high potential for that two-way street to be even stronger than it is in the sort of command and control version that we're existing in now. But I just want to hear what, say, if someone does something wrong, or if there's a growth that needs to happen, what that looks like within this.
That's an interesting. It's interesting the way you put that, Sean, because in 10 years of studying sociocracy, I don't think I've ever come across an example of really an individual doing things. You understand what I'm saying? So it's like number one, it would almost be happening within a circle context, right? So you're framing it from an individual of like how you are individually being held accountable, but within sociocracy, even if it's just you, it wouldn't be just you. It would be you representing the work that you're doing, right? But then it would also, again, have to have somebody else coming down and doing that work with you. So you wouldn't even be by yourself. It would be you and that board member doing work. You understand what I'm saying? So it wouldn't be you being held accountable. It would be y'all being held accountable or whatnot. Because that's the only way sociocracy really works. You know what I'm saying? It's a two-way street. And in order for that two-way street to happen, either you would actually have to be like a part of the board, or a board member with that authority over you would actually be doing the work with you within that particular function that you're.
I wonder if Aton's internet paused for a moment.
Let's just check in. Samuel, did that help? Good, good, good. It does look like Aton froze on my end, and I want to hear Aton's response to this comment as well, but I, in the meantime, would like to just jump in, which is, it looks like we lost him, but I'm sure he'll be back. How can this approach be explained to those that see it as a weak leadership style when one listens to all and works to hear all perspectives? And I appreciate that. We've been working towards what this looked like for us was a shared accountability model at New. And so when it came time for goal setting this year, people were setting their goal, like there are fewer individual goals, like only Hamida or only I are responsible for a thing. And so what it means is Hamida and Yodit might both be working on how do we ensure centering justice is impactful. And so some of the pushback that we got was not only like, well, how do we measure, success, but also who am I accountable to? Who do I report to? So Lizzie and Aton, we lost you for a moment, but we're responding to a question which was like, what about this being seen as like weak leadership? Or this like listen to everybody. And I actually want to hear your response to that. But what I was sharing was how it created for me this idea that I didn't see it as weak at all, but what I think people were resistant to is the being accustomed to somebody telling me what to do and somebody measuring if I did what I'm supposed to do. And why? Because our money was tied to it, right? The reason why we had, goal, whether that was donor money or compensation. And so I noticed that we had created this culture where people were concerned or had a fear of repercussion. And Lizzie, now what I will say is that as a result of that, we weren't getting the kind of creativity, imagination, fruitfulness, the leaderfulness that comes when people are not afraid to fail. And when they know that failure is unlikely because somebody else is like in that formation with you. So there's no way really, it's sort of fail proof, if you will. And I want to be mindful of the dichotomous nature of like win and fail, but like if we wouldn't not deliver on the promise of our mission, which is the only thing that failure would mean to me, right? That's not going to happen because there are accountabilities and checks in place. So to think about a leaderful organization as weak, to me, is where the root issue is. So Aton, I wonder your thoughts on someone's concern that sociocracy or this collective formation and decision-making might be perceived as weak. Yeah, I had that. Or that could be your answer.
I don't understand how a structure that's really designed to really build on the contributions of everybody in a collective manner can be described as weak. I can't really wrap my head around that. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that, because I mean, to me, it seems like just even from a non-sociocratic standpoint, just based on like, cultural heritage or whatnot, you want to go somewhere fast, you do it alone. But if you want to go far, then you do it together. So I don't know. I think like it's like, I don't know. To me, it sounds like a question of I don't know. I would like to hear a little bit more about those concerns if we have time. But I want to make sure that I can fully conceptualize like what the concern is.
Only that I think I'm interpreting, Lizzie, help me here, and appreciate you vulnerably sharing. Like, I feel, they said, I feel it is stronger, but have been told it is weak, and I should just take charge and make decisions, maybe because they don't want to be responsible. And
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, if okay, so let's dig into this a little bit. So is there anybody else that you can pull into that process? Because if there is, then that's one way to, you either create a synergy, or, and here's the thing, if they're saying it's all on you, then okay, it's all on me. This is the work based on my interpretation of it. Don't question it. This is, you wanted me to take charge. This is it. You know what I'm saying? Constructive feedback is fine. But you told me to do it. I'm an intelligent human being. This is the product. How can we improve it? Like, that's kind of the vibe I'm getting.
We are coming up on time, but this feels really important, Lizzie. So I want to say to our beloved CJ community, we know that we're a minute before we end, and if you need to drop off, we totally understand. Carly's also putting something we're trying to do is constantly measure how we're adapting the programs to bring our community the conversations that are helping you realize your visions of a just and thriving society. But I do want to invoke a little privilege here, which is to say, to just stay with this for 1 second, Lizzie, because a couple of things come up for me. One, I really feel you in terms of how we've been operating is by design more efficient, right? And it is because we're operating in a system that valorizes urgency and hyper productivity. And so the shortcut is encouraged. Doesn't mean it's effective. It's not. We know it's not. And how do we know? Because we have abysmal results in our sector and in our country. So it's not actually effective, but it is efficient. And I just want to connect that efficiency back to the very worldviews and systems that I'm inviting and we're practicing here together, untethering ourselves from. Now, that being said, I'm a baby in sociocracy, but y'all, it is some of the best, most productive meetings I've had. Like, I don't leave exhausted. I don't leave unclear. I don't leave disengaged. I don't leave not being clear on what we're working on. And I don't leave feeling like that constant status I have of like, and now there's another piece of like bureaucracy or a thing we have to do. Like, it feels very generative to me, and I feel very alive when I'm in these meetings. And so I think
Sister,
what you go get in there, please.
Just a little bit, because
Okay.
I think that there's a difference between actual efficiency and the perception or image.
That's fair.
Of efficiency or whatnot, because these people, they're great at propaganda. Oh, it's beautiful what they do. They'll tell you there is no alternative to capitalism. They say all of these things. Oh, our factories are the best. This, that, and the third. But I mean, let's okay, that's what they're saying. But let's use our minds and actually look at these processes and look at the results, as you were saying. Is it really more efficient? We're moving fast, but we're not getting far. So
right, that's fair.
What's the purpose of the journey? Is the journey to go fast and then not complete the race, or is the purpose to actually finish the race? You know what I'm saying? And I think what we're seeing is this construct, this philosophy of go fast But where
Yeah.
is it going? Planetary death.
Yeah, maybe expedient would have been a better word, huh? As opposed to efficient. Like it's more expedient, but it's not more effective.
Right.
And to your point, not necessarily more efficient. Will you come back another time and visit us?
Yeah, absolutely.
This
Absolutely.
has been so good. Thank you. Thank you.
Reboot.
Thank you so much, Aton.
This is a season, y'all, where the land lays to rest, things die off so that we can prepare for sowing seeds and for the full harvest next year. And we want to wish you rest. We want to invite you to let the things that need to die off in 2022 to do that, to make room for what needs to be planted and what needs to grow in our next season. It's meant a lot to us that you've been with us this year, and we hope that you will come back in January. When we meet, Carly, when do we meet?
You know, that's a 2023 question, Yodi. Just kidding. I'll put it in my email for y'all tomorrow morning.
So we'll welcome y'all back in when we're ready in 2023. And thank you so much, Hamida and Carly. It has been beautiful to be reconstructing this community with y'all. I love you and I appreciate you dearly.
We love you. Hamida definitely loves you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone who has been with us and seen how we've grown and changed and shifted and have grown and changed and shifted with us too.
Yeah. Aton, you shape-shifted today, my brother. Thank you. We wish you and your loved ones well too. And I'm sure I'll be talking to you.
Reboot. Absolutely. I'm
Yeah.
available.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.